Hey guys, tonight we start with something personal. I'm standing at the edge of a hallway in a house that isn't quite mine yet. The air smells like lemon cleaner and old paper, and my footsteps echo across the wooden floor like I'm being followed. There's a room at the end of the hall I haven't opened yet. The door is pale yellow, almost the color of old teeth, and something about it feels too quiet. I probably won't sleep after this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening in the dark, drop a comment with your location and local time. I want to know who else is awake right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. I first saw the yellow room when we moved into my grandmother's old Victorian home after her passing. The house had stood for over a century, passed down through hands that mostly didn't stay. It was 2 stories, drafty, and creaked like it remembered every footstep that ever touched its boards. My parents were thrilled we were finally out of our cramped apartment, but I remember feeling like the house didn't want us there. There was something different about that one room upstairs. Every other door opened without issue, but this one, this yellow one, was stuck. My dad had to wedge a screwdriver between the frame and twist with a grunt to get it to crack open. I remember the air that spilled out as soon as he did stale. Dense, like it hadn't moved in years. No one had touched that room since at least 1987. That's what we found out later. The wallpaper was yellow. Maybe it had once been cheerful, but now it looked jaundiced. Faded flowers ran up and down the walls, but some parts were bubbling, curling, as if the glue was still melting. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it, the shift, like walking into a memory that wasn't mine. The room had one small window, covered with sheer lace that didn't seem to let light in so much as tint everything amber. The floorboards were slightly warped, and there were faint marks on the wood, like something had been dragged in circles. The only furniture was a rocking chair pushed into the corner. It was turned to face the wall. We didn't talk about it much. My parents said we'd use it for storage, but I kept finding excuses to pass by. Something about it felt unfinished. That first night in the house, I had a dream vivid and color-washed. I was standing in the yellow room, but it wasn't dusty anymore. It was pristine. There was a crib in the corner, freshly painted. Toys lined the shelves, but they were old wooden dolls, cloth animals with button eyes, things from another time. A woman was rocking in the chair, her face turned toward the window. I couldn't see her face, just the side of her head. She hummed something low and tuneless. I woke up before she turned around. It became a recurring thing. Every time I dreamed of her, she got a little closer to facing me, and every time I woke up, I'd hear a soft creak from upstairs, like the chair had moved. A few weeks later, I was home alone on a Saturday. I decided to go back into the room. I told myself it was just a room, just dry air and an old rocking chair. But when I stepped in, it was colder than the rest of the house. Not cool cold. I looked around, and on impulse, I ran my fingers along the wallpaper seam by the door. And that's when I noticed it. Names not written, scratched, Under the top layer of wallpaper, something had carved names in tiny jagged letters. They weren't random. They looked deliberate, as if they were being recorded. Rows and rows of them. Some repeated, some crossed out. And at the very bottom corner of one section, in the smallest print, I saw something that didn't make sense. My name, in the dream that night. The woman finally turned. Her face was waxy, slack. Her eyes were hollow and wide, and her mouth looked like it had been sewn shut and then torn back open. She reached for me and whispered one word. I started sleeping with my door locked after that. I asked my parents about the room, casually at first. My mom brushed it off, said it was always weird, but her mother kept it locked and never explained why. I pressed harder until she finally said something that made my skin crawl. That was supposed to be a nursery, she said, frowning. But after what happened to my brother, my mom just shut the door and never opened it again. Her brother? I didn't know she had a brother. He died, she said finally. He was 2. Crib death. But she always said the room was cursed. She thought something lived in there. I thought it was just grief. There's a photo in our old family album. Page 9 tucked behind a picture of my mom in kindergarten. It's a boy with soft curls and huge dark eyes. He's standing in the yellow room, his hand on the same rocking chair that's still there. Behind him, reflected in the window, there's a faint figure, too tall to be him, too crooked to be human. I don't know what that room was. I only know that when we finally moved out years later, I went to say goodbye. I peeled back another corner of the wallpaper just once more. The list of names had grown, and mine was no longer the last. Some still refuse to believe that places can remember us, or that we can leave parts of ourselves behind in rooms that watched us grow, or cry, or fear. But some rooms do remember. Some rooms want to, and sometimes they write us down. Story 1. The Woman at the Attic Window. When I think back to that house, the one on Chestnut Lane, with the faded blue shutters and the sagging porch swing, I don't remember the birthday parties we threw in the backyard, or the Christmas lights Dad tried to string up every December, but never quite finished. What I remember first, always, is the woman at the attic window. We moved into that house the summer I turned 8. My father had gotten a job at the paper mill nearby, and we needed something affordable, quiet, and with enough space for my mother's garden obsession. The house checked all the boxes. No one asked why it had sat empty for so long. No one asked why it never sold twice. At first, everything was new and magical. I had a whole floor to myself. The attic, which technically counted as a 3rd floor, sat above my room with nothing but a narrow door at the end of the hallway, separating me from it. The first time I noticed the attic window was the second night we lived there. I was lying in bed, staring up at the cracked plaster on the ceiling, when I saw it, a faint light, like a candle had been lit, glowing from the tiny arched window at the very top of the house. I remember thinking it was strange because my parents told me the attic was sealed shut. The door was nailed closed from the outside with old iron nails, the kind that looked hand-forged, rusted, like they'd been put there long before us. My dad had even joked, Looks like someone didn't want anything coming out of there. My mom laughed. I didn't, but now, light. A warm amber glow, soft and pulsing. I climbed out of bed and tiptoed to the hallway, creaking floorboards betraying me with every step. The attic door loomed at the end like a blind eye. I stood beneath it, looking up at that arched window, and that's when I saw her. A silhouette. She wasn't doing anything, just standing there, perfectly still. Her body framed by the weak light behind her. She looked tall, impossibly thin, and though I couldn't make out her features, I saw something that chilled me. Her head slowly turned, not the whole body, just the head, like it was rotating independently from the rest of her. And then she vanished. I told myself it was my imagination, a trick of the light. But the next night she was there again. And the next. Always at midnight. Always in that same still pose. Like a living photograph burned into the window. After the fourth night, I told my parents. My dad said maybe a neighbor's porch light was casting a weird shadow. My mom got quiet. Too quiet. Then she said something strange. I thought we fixed that. What did she mean by fixed? That's when I started noticing other things. Like the attic door, which had seemed so secure, now hung slightly ajar, like something had gently pushed from the inside. My cat Milo, who used to follow me everywhere, now refused to go upstairs. He'd stand at the base of the steps. Fur bristled, growling low in his throat like he saw something I couldn't. And the dreams began, each one more vivid than the last. In them, I was floating, always in the attic. But it wasn't dusty or cold. It was lit by 1,000 flickering candles. The walls were lined with mirrors, but none of them reflected me. Only her, the woman. She walked backward, her eyes fixed on mine, mouthing words I couldn't hear. Then, one night, I did hear them. Let me in. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, with the unmistakable scent of lavender in the air, sweet, sharp, and old. My grandmother used to wear it, but she was long gone, and no one in the house used lavender. One afternoon, when I was home alone, I decided to climb up and look for myself. I dragged a chair from the dining room to the end of the hallway and stood on it, reaching for the old iron latch that kept the attic door from swinging open. It gave with a shriek. The attic smelled like wet earth and rusted nails. Dust particles floated in the single beam of light spilling from the window. It was darker than it should have been, colder than the rest of the house. But the worst part wasn't the air. It was the chair, sitting right under the window. Facing away from it was a rocking chair, and it was moving, not fast, just slowly, gently, like someone had just gotten up from it. I approached, 1 foot at a time, heart knocking against my ribs like it wanted out. When I reached the chair, I saw something draped over the back, something black and thin and wet-looking, hair braided, tied with a red ribbon that was frayed and stained. And then the light changed. The room shifted subtly, like I was no longer alone. My breath caught as I turned slowly around. She was behind me, standing just far enough that I couldn't make out her face, but close enough that I felt the cold emanating off her like a winter fog. I tried to speak, to scream, but my voice betrayed me. She raised one hand, thin and long, and pressed a finger to where her lips should have been. Shh! Then she vanished again. I ran, I don't even remember getting down the stairs. Just the sound of the attic door slamming shut behind me with such force that the nails popped from the wood frame and clattered to the floor. My mom found me curled in the kitchen an hour later, still shaking. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't have to. That night, she came into my room holding something wrapped in a towel. It was an old photograph, sepia-toned, water-stained. It showed a little girl, maybe 6, standing in front of the same attic window, in the same house, with the same rocking chair. She was my sister. My mom whispered, "Elizabeth." She disappeared in that attic when I was 10. They never found her. My mouth went dry, and the window. My mom's eyes filled with tears. I've seen her too. She never really left. After that, we moved. Quickly. No garage sales. No packing. Just left most things behind. My dad said the house would sell eventually. It didn't. Years passed. I grew up. Got married. Had a child of my own. Tried to forget. But one evening, while putting my daughter to bed, she asked me something that stopped my heart cold. "Daddy, who's that lady in the ceiling?" I looked up. We live in a different house now. No attic window, no rocking chair. But every so often, at exactly midnight, the lights flicker. Just once. And I swear I see a faint shadow in the corner of the room. A silhouette. Still, silent, waiting. Some still refuse to believe that the past can follow us. That grief and memory and ghosts are all the same thing. But I know better, because some watchers don't haunt houses. They haunt people, and they never forget your face. Story 2. Lights in the locked basement. I didn't believe in haunted houses until I found myself trapped beneath one. It started with a housewarming party, just the kind of casual night you never expect to remember for the rest of your life. My friend Jason had just bought a place about 20 minutes outside Seattle. A 2-story 1930s bungalow with gray clapboard siding and a sagging porch that still creaked like it remembered too much. He called it vintage. I called it a fixer-upper with secrets. When I showed up, the sky was already that kind of heavy steel blue that only seems to exist in the Pacific Northwest. It felt like rain was crouching somewhere, waiting for the right moment. The house sat on a patch of overgrown lawn surrounded by old trees that leaned in too close, as if eavesdropping. Inside, it was cozy enough, mismatched chairs, pizza boxes stacked like bricks on the dining table, music playing low from someone's Bluetooth speaker. People stood in loose clusters with solo cups in hand, laughing too loud, trying to forget about mortgages and the smell of paint thinner. I drifted from room to room until I ended up in the kitchen, where a narrow wooden door caught my eye. It was locked, dead-bolted, actually, which felt strange. Who locks their own basement door from the kitchen? I jiggled the knob. It didn't budge. The bolt was old brass, thick, and scratched like someone had fought with it. Above it, carved into the paint in small jittery letters, were the words, "Do not open." Of course, that only made me want to open it more. I turned to Jason and raised my eyebrow. "What's with the dungeon door?" He looked over and actually flinched. "Oh, that. I haven't figured out how to open it yet." I frowned. "You bought the house with a locked basement?" He shrugged. Took a sip of his beer. "It was a good deal. And the agent said the basement was just old. Probably a bunch of pipes and asbestos. I figured I'd deal with it later. I didn't press. But something about the way he avoided looking at it stayed with me. The party carried on. I helped myself to another drink. Talked to a girl named Camilla about how weird it was that people our age were suddenly into buying houses with character. We laughed. It got darker, and then the lights flickered. Just once, we all paused, looked up. The room shuddered in half-light for a second, then snapped back to normal. Jason groaned. "The wiring's old," he said. "That happens sometimes. Don't worry about it." We didn't, at least not then. But 20 minutes later, it happened again. Not a flicker this time. A full blackout. Music cut off. Conversations died. The house exhaled a silence that didn't feel accidental. Then the light came on, but not from upstairs. From the basement. We watched in confusion as pale yellow light leaked from the crack beneath the locked door. Soft, pulsing. Jason turned to me, eyes wide. "You saw that, right?" "Yeah," I whispered. "You said that door doesn't open." "It doesn't." The room was dead quiet now. Someone whispered, "Maybe it's on a motion sensor." Jason shook his head. "There's no power wire down there." I checked the panel. That part of the house was cut off years ago. Still, the light glowed. A few of us gathered around the door. I knelt and peered through the crack beneath. At first, all I saw was light on concrete. But then a shadow passed by. Not fast, not sharp. Just there. I stood up fast. Jason pulled on the doorknob again. "Still locked. Still bolted," Camilla said, half laughing. "This is how horror movies start. You know?" And she wasn't wrong. Jason swore he'd never been able to get it open. I believed him. So when the deadbolt clicked on its own and slid open with the mechanical chunk, I knew we were dealing with something else. The door swung open by itself. The light inside was dim, yellowed like it was coming from an old incandescent bulb. And we smelled it musty, damp, like water damage and rust. The stairs were narrow, old wood, sagging at the middle like a tired spine. Jason grabbed a flashlight. "Okay," he said, voice shaking just enough for me to notice. "Let's see what we're dealing with." We went down. It was quiet. Too quiet. No hum of electricity. Just the soft groan of wood under our weight. We reached the bottom and found ourselves in a wide, unfinished basement. Concrete walls. Support beams with old nails sticking out like teeth. Shelves lined with jars. Dozens of them. All sealed. Jason lifted one. Inside was hair. Human. I think blonde. Curled and pressed against the glass. Another jar held teeth. Camilla nearly dropped her phone. "What the hell is this place?" she whispered. And then we heard it. A soft shuffle. Not upstairs. Behind us. We turned. Nothing. Except one of the lights, a small hanging bulb near the center, was swaying, like someone had just brushed it. Jason called out, "Hello!" No answer. The air felt thicker. I swear I could hear my own blood rushing. Then another light flickered on, but not one we had seen before. It came from a side room we hadn't noticed. A door, tucked behind a metal shelving unit. Slightly ajar. Inside, it was colder. The walls were covered in writing. Thousands of names, etched in charcoal, repeating like a chant. Camilla whispered, They're all the same handwriting. And that's when we realized something chilling. Jason's name was on the wall. So was mine. So was Camilla's. Every one of us at that party. We heard a soft click. The basement door upstairs. Closing, then locking. Jason ran to the stairs, bolted up them, and slammed his fist into the door. Hey, let us out. No response. From behind us, a voice dry, whispering like dust on glass. You're already home. I don't remember what happened next clearly. Just flashes, screams, that strange humming sound, like someone breathing in reverse. I remember running, tripping, scraping my elbow open on rusted metal. I remember Camilla sobbing, Jason pulling at the door like it would somehow forgive us. And then light, blinding white light, and we were outside, on the porch, like none of it had happened. But when we looked at the photos on our phones, all of them, every single one, showed the basement, not the party, not the people, just that awful yellow light, and jars lining the shelves, and a dark figure with a cracked smile behind Jason in almost every shot. He moved out the next day. They tore the house down 6 months later. Nothing would grow on the land after that. Not even weeds. Some still refuse to believe that buildings can choose who they let in, or that a house can remember you even after it's gone. But I think some places are alive in ways we don't understand, and some basements were never built to be entered from above. Story 3. The doll with the open mouth. I've never liked dolls, even as a child. They made my skin crawl. Something about the way their eyes never blinked, never looked at you, but through you. I always had a hard time being in the same room with them, especially at night. I'd turn them to face the wall or hide them under a blanket. But somehow, come morning, their faces would be exposed again, grinning softly like they'd heard all my secrets in the dark. It wasn't until I turned 30 and moved into my first real place, one with a studio and a small garden, that I made peace with antiques. I liked the character. I liked the history. I even convinced myself that it would be charming to decorate my space with little curios and second-hand pieces from nearby towns. That's how I found her. Miller's Grove was the kind of forgotten town that doesn't appear on highway signs. The kind with one gas station, 2 cafes, and a single antique shop that you'd miss if you blinked while passing. I went in just to stretch my legs and maybe pick up an old lamp. But I came out with something else entirely. She was in a glass cabinet, nestled between a pair of taxidermy finches and a rusted compass. She was small, maybe 10 inches tall, with delicate porcelain skin that seemed untouched by dust. Her eyes were gray, not blue, not brown, but a deep slate, and painted so precisely that they almost looked wet. Her dress was old-fashioned white lace, now tinged ivory with age and trimmed in fading silver thread. Her black hair was parted neatly in the middle, tied back with 2 tiny velvet ribbons. But what caught me was her mouth. It was open, not in a smile, not a scream, but something in between. Lips parted just enough to show the start of a dark hollow behind her porcelain teeth. Yes, she had teeth, not painted, real-looking, detailed tiny teeth. And it felt deep, too deep, like it didn't belong to a doll at all. The shop owner appeared from the back with a tray of old keys. She was in her late 60s, wearing a wool cardigan despite the heat, and had the kind of gaze that made you feel like she already knew your name. "She's been here a long time," she said without prompting, walking over to the cabinet. "Where did she come from?" I asked. "Estate sale." The house belonged to a woman named Marlene. Never married, never spoke much. The doll was found in a wooden box under her bed. Sealed. They had to pry it open with a crowbar. That should have been enough for me to walk away. But I didn't. I stared at that doll for a full minute before I whispered, "I'll take her." I still don't know why I said it. She came in a plain wooden box lined with straw and a faint scent of lavender. I carried her home, sat her on the center shelf above my desk, and told myself I'd keep her for a week. Just long enough to figure out if she sparked joy. As they say, that night, I dreamed of a tunnel. A long, circular, black tunnel stretching downward into the earth. Something was whispering from the bottom, but I couldn't hear the words. I just knew they were meant for me. I woke at 3:11 am to the sound of tapping. It was coming from the shelf. The doll had turned. She now faced my bed directly. I sat up, heart thudding, and just stared at her. Her mouth looked slightly more open than before. Was that possible? No. It had to be a trick of the shadows. A shift in the angle. I got up, turned her around, and went back to sleep. The next night, I dreamed of that same tunnel again. This time, there were voices at the bottom. Many voices, soft and rhythmic, chanting in a language I didn't know. And something was moving up the tunnel, crawling. Again, I woke at exactly 3:11 am. This time, the doll was on the floor, lying on her side, mouth wide. I didn't touch her. I just left her there. Watched her from bed until the sun came up. By the third night, I was too scared to sleep. I sat in the living room with every light on, holding my phone like a weapon, trying to convince myself that I was just stressed, that the doll was nothing more than ceramic and cloth. I told myself if it moved again, I'd throw it away. At exactly 3:11 am, I heard a small clink, like a teacup cracking. I went to the bedroom. The doll had climbed back onto the shelf. I know how that sounds, but I hadn't touched her. I hadn't been in that room. She was sitting perfectly upright, dressed neatly folded, head tilted slightly, and her mouth. It was gaping now. Not wide enough for a hand, but big enough that I could see something deeper inside. Something moving. I picked her up with shaking hands, ran to the fireplace, and threw her in. The flames barely touched her. The dress blackened slightly, but the porcelain didn't crack, didn't chip, didn't even discolor. I stood there for a long time, waiting, hoping. Then the fire went out by itself. I took the doll out with metal tongs, placed her in a box, sealed it with duct tape, wrapped the whole thing in a blanket, and drove 2 towns over to a landfill. I buried her under layers of gravel and trash and drove home with my windows open and music blasting just to drown out the whispering I thought I was imagining. That night I slept, no dreams, but when I woke up the next morning, she was back, sitting on the kitchen counter, mouth even wider. I started researching. I found old newspaper clippings about Marlene, the woman who owned the doll before. Turns out she'd been committed in 1964. Her journal, which was archived in a library under restricted records, was filled with drawings of the doll, page after page of that mouth, slowly opening over time. One entry read, "She whispers when I sleep. She teaches me old words. She says she remembers before." Another read, "I tried to bury her in the churchyard. The ground burned. And finally, I can feel her inside my mouth. She's learning to speak through me." That night, I put salt across every doorway. I burned sage. I slept in a hotel. Still, at 3:11 a.m., I woke to find her sitting on the table by the TV. Some still refuse to believe that objects can inherit will, that something without breath or blood can want. But I've seen what happens when you ignore the rules. When you bring something home that shouldn't have survived the grave. Now I don't try to throw her away. I keep her where I can see her. And every night, at 3:11 a.m., I listen, because one day I think she will speak, and I don't think I want to know what she has to say. Story 4. Whispering Walls of Pine Creek Farm. When I first arrived at Pine Creek Farm, I was looking for silence. It was early fall, and I had just come out of the other side of a divorce that left my life gutted and empty, like an old barn. I wanted solitude, trees, cold nights, and coffee in the morning, with only birdsong to interrupt me. So when I found a listing for a seasonal rental in the mountains of Idaho, a century-old farmhouse tucked in the belly of a pine forest, I jumped on it. 3 months. No neighbors. No cell reception. It was perfect, or at least that's what I thought. The drive out was winding and wild. Asphalt turned to gravel, then to dirt. The sun ducked in and out between the branches as if pacing me. I arrived just before dusk. The house stood alone, squatting in a clearing like it had been waiting too long for someone to return. Peeling white paint. A rusted wind vane, spinning even though the air was still. The porch steps sagged, and there was a faint hum in the air. I couldn't place like bees, maybe, or static clinging to your skin after a thunderstorm. Inside, the house was cleaner than expected, furnished sparsely but tastefully. A cast-iron stove in the corner. Wooden floors scuffed by generations of boots. A stone fireplace blackened from age. Everything smelled of cedar, old wool, and something else like burned sage or long-extinguished candles. The first night was uneventful. I built a fire, made tea, and watched the stars freckle the sky from the back porch. I slept hard, wrapped in quiet like a blanket. The second night, I heard the whispers. At first, I thought it was wind, a faint, indistinct sound that crept up from the walls themselves, like someone murmuring on the other side of drywall. I froze, pressed my ear to the wooden paneling, and listened. There was no wind outside, but there were words, too low to understand. But they were there. I checked every room. Nothing. I slept with a knife under my pillow that night. The next morning, I noticed something carved into the wooden trim beside the front door. A single word, written in sharp, childish etching. Stay. I don't know how I missed it before. It was small, but clear, like it had been there for a long, long time. I tried to ignore it, but every night, the whispers returned. Sometimes they were louder, sometimes softer. Sometimes I swore they were coming from different rooms all at once. And then it changed. They started saying my name, not just whispering, calling. Once, around 3 Mzora, I sat up in bed with a start, my heart pounding, and I heard it plain and deliberate from the direction of the living room. Michael, that's me. I'd never told anyone where I was. I hadn't filled out the rental under my real name. I hadn't even updated my mailing address. But the house knew. The next night, I set up a voice recorder in the living room. I left it running all night. When I played it back in the morning, the tape hissed with silence at first. But at the 2:51 mark, the whispers began. Don't go. He left us. One more. He hears us now. Michael. Stay. Then, a low moan, almost human, but stretched and hollow, like someone exhaling through a tunnel filled with dust. The tape ended with a single loud bang, the sound of something slamming against the recorder. When I inspected the device, the microphone grill was dented inward. I decided I'd had enough. I packed my bags, loaded the car, left a note for the property owner, apologizing for leaving early. But when I opened the front door to leave, the forest was gone. I don't mean it had changed. I mean it wasn't there. Where there had once been pine trees and gravel and road, there was nothing but white, a blank, pulsing fog that started at the porch and stretched into infinity. No sound, no wind, just the overwhelming absence of anything. I closed the door. I waited. I tried again in an hour. The same. And the walls. They were louder now. They didn't whisper anymore. They sang, low, dissonant tones like voices layered over one another, vibrating the floorboards, rattling the windows. I ran upstairs, locked myself in the bedroom, sat in the corner with my arms around my knees, whispering my own name like a prayer. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs. They were slow, deliberate, coming up. The doorknob turned, stopped, and from the other side, my voice spoke. Michael, let me back in. I didn't move. I didn't sleep. Eventually, it was morning. The forest returned. I left. I drove until I reached a diner with working phones and people and coffee that tasted like rust. I never went back, but something followed. Now, even in crowded rooms, I hear the walls breathe. I feel a hum in old buildings. I still record myself sleeping, and sometimes the recordings end with my voice whispering things I don't remember saying. Some still refuse to believe that houses can miss you, that they can reach for you after you're gone. But I know better, because some walls don't forget, they wait. Story 5. The mirror in room 206. I've always had a complicated relationship with mirrors. They show us everything we are and everything we pretend not to be. You can walk past the same mirror 100 times, but that 101st glance, it can undo you. Not because the image changes, but because you finally notice something you shouldn't. I used to work in real estate. I traveled constantly, stayed in more hotels than I cared to count. Room keys were more familiar to me than my apartment door. I knew every kind of hotel smell, chlorine from indoor pools, burnt coffee from lobby machines, that sterile linen scent that's supposed to comfort you but mostly smells like bleach and lies. But there was only one hotel that ever made me leave everything behind without looking back. It was in a town called Bridge Hollow. Never heard of it. You're not alone. It sits in the crook of two dying highways in upstate New York, a town so small that it didn't show up on my GPS until I was already passing through. I was supposed to be heading toward a larger city for a closing deal, but a storm rolled in faster than expected. Heavy clouds, sudden hail, and a visibility drop that made it feel like the world had been dipped in ash. That's how I found the Hollow Crest Inn. Or maybe how it found me. The sign was crooked. One of the bulbs on the neon vacancy buzzed erratically like it was thinking too hard. The exterior had that 1920s colonial flair, long since bruised by time ivy grown wild. Shutters hanging by a single hinge, and a roof that sagged like a weary spine. But I was soaked. My phone had no signal. I needed shelter. Inside, the air was warm, too warm, like someone had turned the radiators to full blast and then forgot they existed. The lobby was wood-paneled, lined with old paintings of lakes that probably didn't exist anymore. A woman at the front desk didn't speak, just handed me a key, a real key, brass, slightly bent, dangling from a wooden tag room 206. I remember pausing, because there was no check-in form, no ID taken, no small talk, just a glance from her watery eyes that seemed to say, "You're expected." Room 206 was at the very end of a hallway that sloped slightly downward, like the whole building had begun sinking on that side. Carpeted in faded emerald, the hall smelled faintly of mothballs and citrus cleanser. As I walked, the air grew heavier, more charged, like a storm lived in the walls. When I opened the door to room 206, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not quiet, silence. The kind of silence that has texture, that hums just beneath hearing, that feels like you've walked into a room right after someone else left, except you didn't see anyone leave. The second thing I noticed was the mirror. It spanned the entire wall, opposite the bed, edge to edge, from floor to ceiling. Not just large impossible, like someone had sliced open the wall and left it bleeding reflection. It was framed in dull brass, so tarnished in places it looked bruised. Dust clung to its corners, and yet the surface was pristine. No fingerprints, no scratches, no smudges. It reflected everything: the single queen bed, the wooden desk, the armchair with one torn armrest, and me standing there, wet, tired, and not alone. I could have sworn I saw a shadow in the mirror, just over my shoulder. But when I turned around, the room was empty. Of course it was. I told myself I was just worn out. I dropped my bag, peeled off my wet clothes, and took a quick shower. The water barely got lukewarm, and the pressure was like being licked by a dying faucet. When I stepped out and wiped the steam from the bathroom mirror, I saw my reflection, already waiting. Not just mimicking me, waiting. There was a pause before it moved. The briefest delay, like a heartbeat in reverse. I chuckled nervously, rubbed my eyes, and went to bed. I couldn't sleep. The mirror loomed in the darkness like a window into another room. I kept seeing faint flickers in its surface, movement that didn't match the rest of the room. I got up twice to turn the lamp on, then off, then on again. At some point I dozed off and woke up to whispering, low, frantic, from the direction of the mirror. I sat up, heart pounding. The whispering stopped instantly. As if it knew it had been heard, I stood and walked toward the mirror. In the reflection, the bed behind me was empty, but I hadn't left it. I waved my hand. The reflection followed, but too late. A second too slow. Then it smiled. I didn't. I stumbled back, grabbed a towel, and covered the mirror. That night I slept sitting up in the armchair, facing the door, wrapped in a blanket, like a child afraid of the dark. In the morning, the towel was folded on the floor, and written on the mirror, in the condensation from my breath, were the words, "Let me be you." I packed my things, but when I reached the front desk, no one was there. I rang the bell. Once, twice. Nothing. Then I noticed the guest book sitting open. I looked down. Pages of names in faded ink. Most were smudged, unreadable, but mine was already written in my handwriting. Even though I had never signed it, I drove away without checking out. Back on the highway, I finally had signal again. I pulled over and tried to search for Hollow Crest Inn. No results. I tried again. Bridge Hollow. Nothing. The town was gone. Or maybe it had never been there. That night, at home, I unpacked and tried to forget. But when I went to brush my teeth, something felt wrong. The bathroom mirror, it looked off. The lighting was wrong. The angle. And when I leaned close, my reflection leaned closer. Then it winked. I haven't had a mirror in my house since I shave with a window reflection. I use my phone camera carefully. I cover screens when I sleep. But still, sometimes, when I pass glass buildings downtown, I catch a glimpse of myself, and I'm not blinking when I should. Some still refuse to believe that mirrors are just surfaces. But I know better. Some are doors, and some are traps. Story 6. The Boy Under the Floorboards. They say children are the most honest when they're alone. They speak to shadows, name invisible friends, and laugh at corners that make the rest of us uneasy. We tell ourselves it's imagination, innocence. But what if it's not? What if those giggles and glances and whispered conversations aren't flights of fancy, but something ancient, something we forgot how to see? I was never supposed to inherit my Aunt Ellie's farmhouse. It came to me only because no one else wanted it. The house sat on the edge of nowhere, a rust-colored county in rural Georgia that time had left behind. A long dirt road curved toward it like a question mark. And the trees, old and knotted with moss, always seemed to lean toward the house like they were listening. Ellie was my mother's older sister, a recluse. Not quite strange, but not normal either. She never married, never worked, and rarely left her land. Still, her letters to me had always been full of warmth. Little notes scribbled in purple pen, always signed with all the hush in the world Aunt E. When she died, the lawyer said she left the house to me specifically, that she insisted I hadn't spoken to her in over 6 years. The moment I stepped into the house, it was like slipping into a memory I didn't recognize. Everything was still in place. The old wallpaper with yellowing lilies, the faint scent of rosemary and old wood, the copper kettle over the hearth. It felt preserved, not abandoned, but there was something else, a hush. Not peace, not silence, a hush. The kind you find in places where things go unspoken. I spent the first week cleaning. Every room had something curious: cabinets filled with buttons and bones, windowsills etched with strange marks, a pantry full of perfectly preserved jars, labeled with names like Thursday and Don't Forget. And then there was the dining table. It had 5 chairs, but only one was ever pulled out. And every morning, when I came downstairs, a single white plate sat in front of that one chair. Always the same, white porcelain, one silver spoon, polished. At first, I thought maybe I had done it and forgotten. Sleepwalking, habit. But by the 3rd morning, when I knew I had cleared the table the night before, and it had still returned exactly centered, spoon parallel to the edge, I knew something else was at play. I tried not to think about it until the crying began. It started the night of the 7th day. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, too restless to sleep. The house creaked and popped as usual. But then came a sound I couldn't dismiss. Sobbing, a soft, childlike cry. It came from beneath me. I sat up, heart knocking, held my breath. It was faint, but unmistakable, a little boy, weeping gently from under the floorboards. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and lowered myself to the wooden planks, pressed my ear to the floor. It was clearer now. The child was whispering, over and over, "I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. It's dark down here." I scrambled to my feet and turned on every light in the house. I searched the crawl space, the basement, the pantry. Nothing. But the next night, it came again. Same time, same voice. And this time, I heard another voice too. A woman, low, firm. "You stay quiet now. He's still listening." I froze. I was alone. Miles from the nearest neighbor. No radios. No televisions. But that voice was real. It continued. "He can't help you. He belongs to us now." I slept in my truck that night. The next morning, something had changed. In the hallway leading to the guest room, a single child's handprint appeared on the wall, smudged in dust, too small to belong to anyone I knew. That evening, I visited the town library, a single-room building with more dust than books. I asked the librarian, a woman named Gloria, whose lipstick was older than the calendar on the wall, if she remembered my aunt. She blinked slowly. "Ellie Lord." "Yes." Sweet woman. Quiet. Loved her garden. Never did get over losing the boy. "What boy?" She paused, then leaned in. Her brother's son came to live with her for a while. Back in '83, I think. Mother ran off. Father drank too much. Sweet child. Quiet. Like her. What happened to him? Her face darkened. No one knows. Ellie said he wandered off into the woods. But the sheriff said he never saw footprints. And we all know she didn't have no phone. By the time help was called, it was too late. She leaned closer. She never stopped setting the table for him. You know, even after all these years, I left without checking out a book. That night, I searched the floorboards again, and I found something. A loose plank under the bed. Inside, a hollow space, lined with old cloth, and in it 2 things. A tiny blue marble, and a page torn from a children's book. I turned it over, on the back, in a child's handwriting. "Tell him I'm cold." I stared at it for a long time. That night I whispered, "I hear you." The crying stopped, but the dreams began. They were vivid, heavy, like memories I didn't recognize. I'd see a little boy barefoot, in overalls wandering the house. He never spoke, but always looked over his shoulder. His lips moved silently, always mouthing the same thing. I'd wake up gasping. The following day, I opened the attic. Inside, among boxes and dust. I found a small wooden bed, child-sized. The blanket was neatly folded. Beneath the mattress, another note, this one written in an older hand, cramped and careful. He's not gone, just underneath. The roots took him. They made me choose. I left the house again. Spent 2 days in town, drinking too much coffee and watching people not be haunted. I wanted to believe I was unraveling. That grief, isolation, and suggestion were enough to make me lose it. But deep down, I knew the truth. Some pain doesn't fade. Some stories dig in and stay. I returned, and that night, the crying didn't return. But I woke up at 3 on a team to the smell of dirt, earth, cold and moist. It was strongest under the bed. I lifted the loose plank again, and this time, something was missing. The marble. In its place, a small clay figure, roughly shaped humanoid, and on its face, carved crudely my name. I backed away, felt the air shift. The lights flickered. From beneath the floor came a new sound. Not crying, laughter, childlike, but hollow. Some still refuse to believe that houses can keep secrets, that walls can remember, that floors are more than wood. They are thresholds, but I know better, because I hear him still, underneath, waiting, and each night, before bed, I check the plate, and it's never empty. Story 7. Return to the yellow room. Some rooms don't just remember you, they become you. You try to leave them behind, change your address, your clothes, your voice, even your name, but they already live inside you, layered like sediment beneath your ribs. And if you're not careful, you'll find yourself back at their door before you even realize your feet have moved. That's how I returned to the yellow room. I didn't drive there on purpose. Not at first. I had taken a detour. That's what I told myself. I was visiting a client a few towns over, and my GPS rerouted me down a country road I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. It was supposed to be a shortcut. Trees pressed in tight on either side, their branches interlocking like bone fingers. And the road curved in that specific way I hadn't realized I still remembered. And there it was, the house, old, abandoned, choked in ivy. The windows gaped like blind eyes. The porch leaned. The roof bowed. And the yellow room upstairs, far right, was still there, visible from the road like it had never stopped watching. I pulled over without thinking. By the time I got out of the car, my hands were shaking. Why was I here? I'd spent my adult life forgetting this house. I'd moved across the country, filled therapy notebooks with reasons why I was fine. I even avoided the color yellow, couldn't wear it, couldn't paint with it, couldn't look at daffodils without my stomach turning. But now I was here, and the door was open, not broken, not kicked in, just gently ajar, as if waiting. The inside smelled like time, dust, decay, something sweet, faint lavender, the kind Ellie, my mother's mother, used to stuff into pillow sachets. And underneath that, something else, mildew and rusted nails, and wood that had absorbed too many secrets. The house had been stripped mostly bare, except the yellow room. I hesitated at the bottom of the stairs. They were just as I remembered. 11 steps, each creaking in its own language. The hallway was narrower than my childhood memory. The wallpaper here had curled, peeled back like dry skin. Faint writing scratched, inlined one stretch of wall. I didn't dare read it. The door to the yellow room was closed now, closed tight, unlike the others, which had surrendered to rot. This door was clean, no dust on the handle, no signs of weathering. I reached out, the metal was cold, unreasonably so, and the moment my fingers touched it, I remembered. I remembered the first dream. I was 8. We had just moved in. I'd been warned not to go in the yellow room. It's not safe, my mother said, then corrected herself. I mean, the floorboards are weak. But that night, I dreamed of it anyway. In the dream, the door opened itself. Inside was golden light, soft, warm. A cradle sat in the center of the room, and someone was humming. A tune I didn't know, but somehow recognized. I walked toward the cradle. Inside was not a baby, but something swaddled in yellow cloth, and it breathed. And from the corner, the woman watched me, sitting in the rocking chair, her face obscured by shadows. But I could see her eyes. They were mine. I'd never told anyone about that dream, not until now. The doorknob turned. It gave with a soft click, and the door swung inward, revealing the room that had held its breath for 26 years. It was almost unchanged, the wallpaper yellow with faded sunflowers clung to the walls in stubborn patches. The air was still, heavy, laced with the same scent from my dream. The rocking chair sat in the far corner, turned toward the window. The cradle was gone, but the rug was still there, frayed at the corners, its flower print dull to ash tones, and the stain was still in the center. Dark. Round. I remembered asking my mother about it once. She told me it was just water damage. It wasn't. I stepped inside. The air shifted behind me. The door clicked shut. No wind. I didn't panic. Not yet. Instead, I walked to the wall near the window, the spot where I once peeled the wallpaper back and found the names. I knelt and pulled. It came away easier than I expected. Behind it, scratches, deep, desperate. Hundreds of names etched into the wood beneath. Some I recognized, neighbors, kids from school. Some were unfamiliar. Names from other decades. Names of people who had gone missing and never made the news. And then mine, over and over and over. Each one deeper, more frantic. Some upside down, some backwards. All mine. In the corner of the wall, something new. A sentence. You always come back. The rocking chair moved. Just once. A long creaking glide backward. I turned. She was there. Not the woman from my dreams, not anymore. She was taller, thinner. Her hair hung in thick ropes down her back. Her skin waxy, wrong, like candle wax left in the sun. She sat perfectly still, but her mouth moved. She whispered, and I understood. She was saying my name, not just once, all the ways I've ever said it. I backed away, hit the wall. The names began to hum. Not the words, but the wood. It vibrated behind me, like a heart. I whispered, "What do you want?" She lifted a hand. Long fingers, nails like stained ivory, pointed to the cradle, which was there now, where it hadn't been, in the center of the room, covered in yellow cloth. I approached slowly. The cloth moved. I pulled it back. Inside was me, but younger, sleeping, mouth open, breathing shallow, eyes fluttering. I stumbled back, fell. The woman was standing now, closer. I couldn't hear her feet, But she was near, and behind her, the walls began to shift. The wallpaper curled outward, like petals, revealing more names, revealing rooms, other rooms. Behind the yellow room was a hallway I'd never seen, doors lining each side. I heard voices, crying, laughing, screaming, a chorus of past selves, trapped in layers of memory. Each one of them me. Some still refuse to believe that a room can trap time, that it can grow inside you like mold in the lungs. But I know, because I've been here before, because I never left, because every time I try to rebuild my life, I wake up in this chair, facing the window, rocking, waiting, and the cradle never stays empty for long. Story 8. Hands on the bed frame. The first sign that something was wrong came not with a scream, but a sigh. I was in that half-sleep state, the place between the end of a dream and the reluctant return to waking. It was quiet, warm, still. Then I felt it so subtle I almost dismissed it. A soft shift in weight at the foot of my bed. Not enough to startle, not enough to scare. Just enough, like someone was standing there in the dark, resting a hand gently on the mattress. And in that moment, somewhere inside my brain, something ancient stirred. A tension I hadn't felt since I was a child, hiding under covers. Convinced that if I kept my eyes closed long enough, the monsters wouldn't find me. I didn't open my eyes that first time. I told myself it was a dream, the memory of motion more than motion itself. I rolled over. The pressure faded. Morning came. The birds sang. The world continued. I should have left then, but I didn't. I had just moved into the house, a 1940s cottage tucked behind a quiet street, lined with tall sycamore trees that shed bark like ghosts shedding skin. The house was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and a kitchen that still had its original tile counters, but it was mine. After years of city apartments and shared walls, of late-night sirens and hallway arguments, the silence of this new place felt like peace. For the first few days, I walked barefoot through every room, opened every cabinet, just to listen to the empty echo inside. I cooked in silence, worked at the window, read books until my eyes gave out. There were no red flags, no cold spots, nothing dramatic, only that pressure at the foot of the bed. And then, a few nights later, something more. It was around 2:45 when I woke again. Not from a nightmare, not from sound, just awake, suddenly, as if called. My body felt heavy. The air was still, but something was different. There was a quiet tension in the room, like the hush that falls just before the power goes out. My skin prickled. That's when I felt its fingers. They were cold, dry, resting against the side of the metal bed frame. I couldn't see them, but I could feel their shape, the faint press of them curling around the underside of the frame, as if someone were crouched just beneath the bed, bracing themselves. I didn't move. I barely breathed. My pulse roared in my ears. I waited, paralyzed by the quiet horror of not knowing whether I was still dreaming. And then, slowly, the fingers withdrew, not jerked away in surprise, just slowly, sliding back down, retreating like they hadn't meant to be noticed. I stayed frozen for another hour, staring into the dark until the sky outside turned silver. In the morning, I found faint marks on the metal, smudges like oil, a faint shape like handprints left behind. I tried to clean them, but they returned the next night. And the next. I stopped sleeping in the bedroom, moved my bedding to the couch, told myself I just needed a change of scenery, that it was probably all in my head. The mind, after all, plays tricks in the quiet. But the hands followed. 2 nights later, I was asleep on the couch when I felt it again, that unmistakable pressure. Except this time it was on my calf, like someone had rested a palm there. A gentle, testing weight. I sat up too fast and knocked my water glass to the floor. The room was empty, or it looked that way. The next morning, I found a single piece of thread caught in the edge of the couch upholstery. It was white, fine, like it had come from something old or someone. Then the knocking began. It came every night at the same time to Lou 47, 3 soft taps. Not on the walls, not the window, underneath the bed. Tap, 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 always 3. Always gentle, like a child politely asking for permission to come up. The sound made me nauseous. I tried salt across the thresholds. I burned sage. I bought motion sensors and night lights. But none of it mattered, because the thing didn't want to hurt me. Not yet. It wanted attention, and I gave it. The worst night came 2 weeks later. I'd been exhausted emotionally, physically, existentially. I was drifting in and out of dreams when I heard the sound of breathing Kodayon. Low, dry, labored, and very close. Then I felt the hands again. This time, not at the edge of the bed, but on either side of my head. They were resting on the pillow, cold, still, just there, as if someone were kneeling over me, face inches from mine, watching me sleep. I opened my eyes. The room was pitch black. I reached for the lamp. It didn't turn on. I reached for my phone. Dead. The breathing grew louder. I whispered, please, and the hand slid away. The light returned. Everything was normal, except for one thing. In the corner of the room, near the closet door, the carpet was wet. No leak, no water. Just a single damp handprint pressed into the beige fibers. 5 long fingers, slightly too thin. The palm impossibly narrow. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I started researching the property. The house had no reports, no violent history. But I learned something else. Something strange. 10 years earlier, a woman named Lillian had rented the house. She lived alone. She vanished one night. Police found no signs of forced entry. The bed was made. Her shoes were by the door, but beneath the bed, a series of carved lines in the wood, faint, delicate, and next to them, carved carefully, a message. You won't sleep forever. I visited the library, dug through old clippings, an obituary from 1948. A little boy, 5 years old, died in his sleep. Same address. No cause listed. The mother, they said, had been found at the foot of the bed, eyes open, whispering. She never spoke again. I moved out the next day. But even now, no matter where I sleep, I wake at 2:47. Major sees. Sometimes the bed creaks, sometimes the frame groans, and sometimes, if I listen closely enough, I can hear the fingers curling around the edge. Not to hurt me, not yet, just to remind me. They remember. Some still refuse to believe that hauntings don't always begin with doors slamming or objects flying. That sometimes The quiet ones, the ones that wait, that reach slowly, gently are worse, because they're patient, because they get close enough to learn your name, and once they do, they never let go. Story 9. The voice behind the door. The apartment was quiet, not peaceful, just quiet in that way old buildings often are. The kind of silence that hums low under the floorboards and between the pipes, that settles into corners and waits. It was the kind of place you don't notice right away: modest ceilings, faded molding, walls with a hint of green that once must have been mint or sage. I moved in mid-November. A sublet from someone who left in a rush. The Craigslist ad didn't say much. And the landlord, an older woman named Rosa, didn't either. She gave me the keys without a lease. Just a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and said, "Stay quiet at night." I thought she meant noise complaints, thin walls. Maybe someone downstairs had kids, or there was a neighbor with insomnia. But when I moved my things in, I realized every other unit in the building was empty. No lights, no names on mailboxes, no footsteps overhead. And yet, some nights, I felt watched, not from the windows, from within. The door was at the end of the hallway, the one that curved slightly to the left, where the wood beneath my feet always felt softer than the rest. Not soft like rot, soft like memory. Like something had passed there often enough to leave a groove. The door itself wasn't special. Brown wood, no knob, no keyhole. Just a small metal plate where something had clearly once been, maybe a lock, maybe a peephole. I didn't ask questions. I was grateful to have a place. My last lease had ended badly, and this felt like a new start. I told myself the door didn't matter, until the first time I heard it. It was a Tuesday. I remember that, because I had fallen asleep with my laptop still playing a documentary I had no interest in. I woke to silence. Real silence, not the kind you get when a video ends, but the kind that feels too still, too expectant, the kind that comes just before something happens. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes, and that's when I heard it, my name, spoken softly, without emotion, from behind the hallway door. "Daniel?" I didn't respond. Not then. I held my breath, waited. Nothing followed. No knocking, no second call. Just that single word. And then the hallway returned to its unnatural silence. I told myself I'd dreamed it, but the next night, it happened again. Same voice, same time, around 3:12. Daniel, this time, it was closer. Not louder closer. As if whoever or whatever was behind the door had pressed its mouth to the wood. I lay frozen, listening to my own pulse hammering in my ears. By the third night, it spoke again. Not just my name. It said, "You know me." I don't remember standing. I don't remember walking down the hallway. But I found myself there, bare feet on that soft patch of floor, face inches from the old wooden door. I whispered back, "Who are you?" No answer. I waited, long enough for my skin to go cold. Then I backed away, slowly, never turning my back to the door. I didn't sleep. Didn't even try. The following day, I spoke to Rosa, asked her about the door. She looked up from her coffee like I'd asked her what death tasted like. "There is no door," she said. I laughed, thinking she was joking, but her face didn't change. "You mean that literally?" She nodded. "There used to be, long ago, before I owned the building, but it was sealed. Why? She looked away. Because someone answered. That night, I left the hallway light on. I sat in the living room with all the lamps burning, the TV playing something loud, something full of people. I needed noise, distraction, human voices to drown out the one I knew would return. But it came anyway, not through the walls, inside my head. A voice like a sigh pressed directly into my skull, into the space between thought and memory. Let me in. I covered my ears, shut my eyes, whispered prayers I didn't believe. It didn't help. The door, the voice, the presence, it became part of the house. Not an intruder, not even a guest, just the air. The way the light didn't quite reach the end of the hallway. The way that stretch of floor creaked a second after I stepped off it. Every night at 3:12, like clockwork, let me in. I began to unravel. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating much. The voice became a rhythm, a drumbeat beneath everything I did. I'd go to the grocery store and hear it between cereal aisles. I'd try to answer phone calls and hear it whisper under the dial tone. And worst of all, I started answering back. At first, I just said no, softly, a whisper in the dark. Then I said, please stop. Then, what do you want? And finally, I asked the thing I shouldn't have asked. What happens if I do? There was silence that night, a silence that stretched too long. And then, you remember, I started dreaming. Not dreams like we usually mean. These were memories, or at least, they felt that way. I saw myself as a child, standing in front of the same hallway, reaching for the door that wasn't there yet. I saw my mother, holding my wrist too tightly, pulling me away. I saw someone, me, not me, opening the door anyway. And I saw what was inside. It wasn't darkness. It was light, but wrong. Bright like a burning eye. Bright like hunger. And voices. Thousands. Not screaming, not singing, just talking, all at once. A tidal wave of stories and secrets and sorrow. Every voice layered on every other, canceling each other out, making a noise that was both deafening and silent. And then I woke up, drenched in sweat, throat sore, fingers raw from where I'd been clawing at the bed sheets. I don't know how long I lasted after that. A few more nights, a few more years. Time bent inside that apartment. My days blurred. My hands shook. The voice never stopped. Let me in, until one night I did. I walked to the hallway. The wood groaned under my feet, like it knew what I was doing. The air was colder than usual, the silence heavier. I placed my hand on the door. It pulsed beneath my palm. I pressed. It opened, not wide, just a crack. Inside was me, not my reflection, not a twin. Me, standing in a hallway that looked like mine, but wasn't. He looked at me and smiled. Thank you. The door slammed shut, and I woke in bed, breathing hard, alone. Everything looked normal, but the light was wrong. And when I walked to the mirror, it didn't reflect me. Not quite. I haven't opened that door again. I moved, I changed my name. I stopped answering to Daniel. But every night, just before, it's the 3:12 Apam. I feel it. The shift, the weight, the question, unspoken, but ever present. Will you let me in again? Some doors never fully close. Some names, once spoken, stay echoing behind the drywall. And some invitations can't be ungiven, especially the ones you don't remember saying yes to. Story 10. The Collector's House. I saw the listing on a Wednesday evening. Around the same time, the sky outside my apartment turned the color of bruised peaches. It was a Craigslist ad, buried halfway down the page. With no photo and only 9 words room for rent in artist's house. No questions. The address was listed as being 2 towns over. Just past the bend in the highway, where the signal always cuts out. I clicked. Half out of boredom. Half because I had a few too many tabs open, and the week had been heavy. The price was absurd cheap, even by rural standards. No deposit. Just pay cash monthly. Keep to yourself, and respect the boundaries of the collection. That last line should have been enough for me to close the window. Instead, I messaged the poster. Within 10 minutes, I had a reply, a time, a name May, and directions that didn't use landmarks or highway signs, but strange phrasing, like turn left where the trees thin out, and past the rock that looks like a broken head. Still, I went. I don't know if I believed it was real. I think I half expected it to be a prank, or some bored teenager luring people into nonsense. But I drove anyway. I told myself it was for the story. That maybe I'd end up with something weird to write about in a zine. Or a bar tale I could roll out when people wanted creepy Craigslist anecdotes. The house was real. It sat at the edge of a woodline, shielded by trees so tall and close that the sun could barely reach the soil. The driveway was gravel, the stones too white, like they'd never been stepped on. The house itself was old but strangely untouched, Victorian bones with shutters too perfect, and a wraparound porch that looked almost staged, like a memory being reperformed every day, over and over, for no audience. May answered the door before I knocked. She was older than I expected, maybe late 60s, but tall and thin, and dressed like someone who didn't get cold. Her hair was long and iron gray, tied in a braid that reached her waist. She smiled without showing teeth and motioned me in. "You're punctual," she said. "They like that." I should have asked who she meant. Instead, I stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Not rot, not mold, but something like dried flowers and old paper and salt. It reminded me of attics and funeral parlors. The kind of smell that clings to heavy curtains and skin. The walls were covered, built from collections. Every surface bore something arranged, categorized, labeled. On the front hallway alone, there would be a wall of antique baby shoes, nailed heel to toe in spirals. Rows of feathers, sorted by species and condition. Mason jars full of marbles, each with a tag indicating a year. But no explanation. I tried not to stare. May led me through the house in silence. Every room was worse. In the kitchen, dozens of clocks, none ticking, each stuck at 3:12. Their hands motionless, but vibrating faintly if you stared long enough. In the hallway, cracked porcelain dolls without eyes, arranged in pyramids around door frames. In the parlor paintings, hundreds of them, all of the same child brown hair, blue eyes, neutral expression painted at different ages, always wearing the same white shirt. Some looked recent, some ancient. "They're not all mine," May said suddenly, as if reading my thoughts. Some are gifts. Some were borrowed. She stopped outside a narrow door near the base of the stairs. "This is your room," she said. "You'll stay here. The rent is in the box. You'll leave it there on the 1st. Quiet hours are from 10 to 4. Don't open the red door. Don't rearrange the shelves. And if you hear anything, whisper your name after midnight. Don't answer, even if it uses your voice." I laughed. She didn't. The room was plain. A bed, a desk, a shelf with nothing on it. The only thing odd was the mirror. It was covered in velvet, nailed to the wall like a painting. The fabric too thick to move without tools. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house didn't settle like old houses do. It didn't creak or groan. It clicked, like a typewriter with no keys. Like teeth. At 12:47, something tapped on my door. Once, then whispered my name. Soft, "Daniel," then again, quieter, "Daniel." The voice was mine. I held still in bed. Blankets pulled over my mouth like a child. Heart thrumming against my ribs like it wanted out. Eventually, it stopped. In the morning, May was in the kitchen, slicing something that looked like root vegetables but smelled like burnt matches. I asked her, as lightly as I could, "Does the house God talk?" She didn't look up. "Not the house." She said, "The collection." That was when I noticed the jars. I hadn't seen them before. They lined the top shelves of the pantry glass jars, sealed tight with wax, each filled with hair. Not shorn hair, pulled hair, root and all. Different colors, textures, each labeled with a name and a single date. Mine wasn't there yet. That night, I woke up at 3:12. The door to my room was open. May stood there, smiling. Behind her, in the hallway, the red door was open. Inside, rows of skin, stretched, preserved, not leather, human. I wanted to scream. I couldn't. She whispered, "Do you want to be part of something permanent?" Then she closed the door, and I woke in my bed, alone. Some still refuse to believe that collectors don't just hoard objects, that they don't seek permanence in people, too. But I know better, because when I left the next morning, breath shaking, spine cold, I looked in the rearview mirror. May stood in the driveway, holding a jar. Inside, brown hair, rooted. Mine. Story 11. The smoke that thinks. The first time I saw it, I thought it was a gas leak. It was dusk in Chicago, mid-November, and the streetlights had just begun their nightly flicker to life. I was standing at the bottom of the stairs, outside my building, fumbling with my keys while balancing a bag of groceries, when something moved in the alley across the street. Not someone, something. A column of smoke. Thick, dark, heavy. But it wasn't rising. It was coiled, low to the ground. And it was moving with purpose. It rolled down the alley like a fog with intent, hugging the brick walls, brushing low over trash cans and pallets, trailing just behind a rat that seemed unaware it was being followed. When I blinked, it paused, as if it had noticed me. And then, just as suddenly, it dispersed, evaporating into the shadows between buildings. Gone before I could convince myself it had ever been there. I told myself it was just exhaust, some strange air current, city smog given shape by trick lighting and stress. But I was wrong. I'd only just moved into the tenement, an old 6-unit building on the border between West Town and somewhere forgotten. The rent was suspiciously low. The neighbors kept to themselves, and the hallway always smelled faintly of boiled cabbage no matter how much Febreze I sprayed. It had character, I told myself. Charm, vintage warmth. But even from the beginning, something about the building felt off. The light in the hallway never stayed on, no matter how many times it was fixed. The bulb outside my door would flicker for a few seconds when I passed, then die. The stairs creaked in the wrong places on the third and fourth steps, no matter where I stood. And there was an apartment at the end of the hall, Unit 6C, that no one ever entered or left. Its doorknob was wrapped in cloth. A faint black mark like a thumbprint made of soot had been smudged across its frame. But I didn't ask questions. Rent was rent. That was before the smoke came inside. It started as a smell. Faint, bitter, like wood soaked in something metallic. It would drift under the door, in the middle of the night, curling along the floor like lazy incense. At first, I thought it was a neighbor smoking in the hallway. But the building was non-smoking, and the smell, it didn't stick. I'd wake coughing, my eyes stinging. But by the time I turned on the light, the air would be perfectly clear. Crisp, cold, dry. Then came the dreams. In them, I wandered long corridors, always concrete, always underground. The walls wept. My feet were bare, and the smoke was always just around the corner. Whispering. It didn't speak words at first. It sang, a song I didn't know, yet remembered. Polish lullabies, half mumbled, half hissed. I don't speak Polish. I never have. But when I woke, the melody lingered. And some nights, I found myself humming it while brushing my teeth, not even realizing what I was doing. One morning, I woke up with soot under my fingernails. I started asking questions, tentatively, casually. The guy in 4B Jonas had lived there 7 years. I asked him if he ever saw smoke. He went pale. Said, "You've seen it." I nodded. He closed his door. That night, I slipped a note under his door, asking for answers. I never heard from him again. A few days later, I heard the maintenance guy yelling. I opened my door, just enough to see them breaking down the door to 4B. Jonas was gone, his furniture covered in ash, all his mirrors broken from the inside. I moved my bed away from the wall that bordered Unit 6C. The smoke came anyway. It began thinking. I don't know how else to say that. I'd be reading. And suddenly I'd feel it behind me like a question, not a presence. A prompt. It didn't speak. It suggested, and then the whispers became clear. Not in the room, not in my head. In the vents, at exactly 3:33, Ane Sairata Hadam. Mi Verdisiki, every night. 3 words. It remembers you. I stopped sleeping. I researched the building. Built in 1919, originally a boarding house, had burned once. In 1938, 8 people died. One wasn't found. Her name was Eva, an immigrant, 22, believed to have started the fire. They never found her remains, just a pile of scorched hair. And on the wall above it, a word scrawled in ash. Zostav, leave. I went to a Polish Catholic church, asked an old priest about spirits that spoke through smoke. He looked tired, old, sad. He said, smoke is the oldest body, the first one that left the garden. I asked what to do. He said, "Don't answer it." I already had. That night, I found my name written on the bathroom mirror, not in marker, not in steam, etched. I moved out the next day. But even now, in my new place, on a clean street, with light and laughter and sound, I still smell it, the bitter scent of wood and metal. And some nights, when I awake at 3:33, I'm, I hear her humming, not outside the door, inside the walls. Because some things don't haunt buildings. They haunt patterns. And once you've been thought by something that isn't human, you can't ever be unknown again. Story 12. The room you forgot renting. There's something about attics that makes you remember things you didn't know you'd forgotten. Old smells, childhood echoes, that crackle of insulation beneath your feet. I never liked them, not even when I was a kid. But when I saw the ad for a sublet just outside Boston loft-style space, private access, utilities included, I thought maybe I was over it. I was wrong. I rented the attic room of a house built in 1890. The owners were an older couple, the kind who spoke softly and walked even softer. They lived on the main floor. I only saw them twice. The woman handed me a key, told me to just be polite to the house, and then returned to her knitting. The room itself wasn't much slanted ceilings. A small window. The bed wedged into a nook under the eaves. But it was quiet. And it was mine. Or so I thought. The first week was uneventful. I worked remote, ordered groceries, and watched shows with my laptop propped against a milk crate. I didn't hear anything, didn't feel anything. If anything, the space was too still. Sound got swallowed in there. No creaking wood, no wind, not even the usual scurrying of rodents in the walls. It was like the air was too dense, or maybe too old to move. But then I started waking up elsewhere, the first time. I thought I was dreaming. I opened my eyes and I was sitting in a different attic. Same layout, but the paint was peeled, the walls were damp, and the smell was wrong. Mildew, salt, and something sharp. I blinked, and I was back in bed, but it happened again. And again. Always around 2 Zarwaib. I'd fall asleep in the rented attic and wake up in another one. A place I knew, somehow. Knew the feeling of the floor under my feet. Knew where the light switch should be, even though there wasn't one. Sometimes I'd find things in there, a toy I swore I'd lost as a kid. A coat I hadn't owned in years. A photograph with the faces scratched out, except mine. One morning, I woke up clutching a house key I didn't recognize. It was cold, brass, old. I asked the landlords if they'd been in the attic while I was asleep. They just shook their heads and said, "She doesn't like being disturbed." I asked who. They said, "The one who stays when everyone else leaves." That night, I pushed a box aside under the bed and found a second door hidden in the floorboards. I hadn't noticed it before. I pried it open with a knife. Inside a narrow staircase, wood rotted but sturdy enough. I went down. What I found was another room, not beneath the attic, inside it. Same dimensions, same walls, same slant, but wrong, dustless, too clean. A table in the center with a single chair. The chair faced away, but I could hear breathing. I stepped closer. My ears popped like I'd crossed altitudes. The air grew warm, damp, and then the thing in the chair turned around. It was me, but older, tired, gray around the eyes, and it smiled. You finally came back. I stumbled, turned, fled. But when I returned to my real attic, the door to the hidden stairway was gone, not sealed, gone. I moved out 2 days later, but the dreams didn't stop. I still wake in that other attic, the one I forgot renting. I find notes now, on my pillow, in my shoes. They all say the same thing. You're late for check-in. Some still refuse to believe that you can accidentally make yourself a ghost. That by renting too many places, borrowing too many lives, walking through too many other people's rooms, you leave pieces behind. But that's how hauntings begin. Not with death, with forgetting. Story 13. The house that doesn't want you to leave. I moved in on a Tuesday. The house was tucked at the end of a cul-de-sac in upstate New York, framed by trees so tall and tight, they looked like they'd grown deliberately to hide something. The ad had said transitional rental, a term I'd never heard before. The landlord said the last tenants had gone abroad suddenly. No other explanation. I didn't care. I'd just gone through a breakup. Needed space, quiet, something with windows. The house had plenty. 3 bedrooms, an attic, a little patch of yard. Too big for me, honestly. But the price was good, and I was tired of looking. I unpacked slowly, day by day, room by room. But some rooms resisted. The one next to the kitchen, the smallest bedroom, would never quite warm up. Even with the heater on, the walls remained cool, the air still. I tried to use it as an office, but every time I sat at the desk, I got the sense that someone was standing behind me, watching. Not hostile, just present. The first week, nothing happened. Not really. A few lights flickered, a few taps in the pipes. Things you expect in old houses. But the second week, I noticed something strange. My phone wouldn't hold a charge inside the house. I'd leave it plugged in overnight, only to find it dead in the morning. It worked fine at the grocery store. Died again the moment I stepped back inside. I shrugged it off. Maybe a wiring issue. I used a power bank instead. Then things started going missing. Nothing dramatic. Just small things. A sock, a spoon, my toothbrush. They'd vanish for a day or two, then reappear in the exact place I swore I'd looked 5 times. One morning, I found my missing keychain in the freezer. But the worst part, the house locked me in. It happened on a Sunday. I stepped out to check the mailbox. When I turned back, the front door was shut, locked. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even pulled it all the way closed. My keys were inside. I stood there for a moment, confused. Then I knocked. No one answered. Of course not. I lived alone. I circled the house, trying every window, every one locked. Even the ones I knew I'd left, cracked open the night before. I stood in the backyard for nearly 20 minutes before a neighbor I'd never seen before approached from the street. "You got locked out, didn't you?" he said. I nodded. He shook his head. "She does that." "Who?" "The house." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. He didn't laugh back. "She likes to keep you where she can see you." Eventually, I got back in through the basement window. But after that, I never left the house without taking all my keys, my phone, a backup charger, and a handwritten note with my name and address, just in case I disappeared. Because that's the thing about the house. It didn't want me to leave, not just physically, mentally, emotionally. I'd start writing an email to a friend just to catch up, and when I read it back, it made no sense. Just strings of the same phrase over and over. I like it here. I like it here. I like it here. I didn't write that. I'd journal at night, and in the morning I'd find pages of unfamiliar handwriting, childish scrawls, sometimes angry, sometimes pleading. One note just said, "I'm still here. Let me out. Let me out. Let me out." One night, I tried to leave, packed a bag, grabbed my car keys, opened the door, and the house screamed, not like a person, like a building in pain. Every pipe burst, every light bulb shattered, the walls groaned, the floor cracked, the temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. I slammed the door and fell to my knees. The house went quiet, and then the lights came back on. I stayed another week, another month. Each time I thought about leaving, my chest would tighten, my hands would shake. I'd forget why I wanted to go. One morning, I woke up and the backyard was gone, not covered in fog. Gone. Just a flat wall where the back windows used to look out. I opened a cabinet that had always been empty, and inside was my old wedding photo. Burned. I never brought it with me. I don't remember packing it. But the house did. The neighbor came by once more before he moved. He said, "Don't worry. She gets bored eventually." I asked what that meant. He just said, "Hope you're not her type," and walked away. I left that night, or tried to. I walked out the front door with nothing but the clothes on my back. Didn't look back. I made it halfway down the street before I realized the air smelled exactly the same. That strange mix of rosemary, wood, and electricity. And when I turned the corner, the house was there. Not my house, but the same one. Same door, same porch, same light in the window. And my keys were in my pocket again. Some say houses are just wood and stone, but I think some are more. Some remember you, some choose you, and once they know your name, they keep you even when you think you've gone. The house is quiet now, not the kind of quiet that makes you reach for a light switch or check your locks twice. It's the soft quiet, the kind that settles in your chest and tells you the stories are done. For tonight. You're still here. You made it. The night, whatever it was holding, has passed. Maybe you're lying in bed now, covers pulled to your chin. Your breathing finally steady. The room around you familiar. Safe. But still, your ears are a little more alert than usual. The shadows, a little deeper. The silence, a little more curious. That's okay. That's what stories are meant to do. They're old magic. Those tales of doors that think, of houses that remember, of voices behind wood and smoke that lingers. They're reminders that not everything can be explained, and not every quiet place is empty. Outside your window now, maybe the breeze is moving through the trees. Maybe the curtains shift a little, just enough to make you look. Maybe you hear the floor creak, not loud, not alarming. Just a small stretch of wood, remembering every step that's passed over it. Let it, that's all they are, really, echoes. And like all echoes, they fade. So let your eyes grow heavy. Let your breath fall into rhythm with the stillness. Picture a room warmed by candlelight, a chair by the window, dust dancing in the glow, nothing moving except the wind, and far away, behind a closed door, the last story curls itself to sleep. Sleep well.